All right. Welcome, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. I will be your host. My name is Dan Garfield. I am VP of Open Source for Octopus Deploy, and excited to have with me today Laurent, who is a powerhouse, amazing support person. He's been working with not only CI/CD but deployment and Kubernetes for a long time, and is our resident Frenchie, so he's representing our Olympian today. Thanks,
Thank
Laurent.
you, Dan. Hi,
So
everybody.
good morning to all of those who are joining from, looks like we have folks from all over the United States. We have some folks from South America. Good afternoon, good evening to all of you in Europe, some of you in Israel, some of you in Eastern Europe as well. So thanks for joining. Today's topic is going to be all things CI/CD. So we're going to be talking about how to build your software using CI pipelines, running tests, and all those kinds of things. Now, this is part of a three-part series, a Codefresh 101, if you will. The next part is going to be August 20th, where we're going to do GitOps and Argo. We're going to be talking about Argo CD. And then the one in September 3rd is going to be talking about environments and promotions, which is going to be very, very cool and show off some capabilities and components that a lot of people haven't seen before because they're not, I guess I would say that they're more cutting edge to the software delivery world. So without further ado, let's jump into the agenda here. So just a quick intro here, and then we're going to jump into demos from Laurent. And Laurent is going to be showing these things live. Now, feel free to ask your questions throughout as you have them. There is a QA button, so hit that QA button to ask questions. And then there's the chat button where you can just chat in general. Now, the QA button makes it so that we can make sure that we answer your questions either via text and share with everybody or privately in text. And then in the chat, just for general discussion. And we may sometimes miss questions that go in there. So comments, perfect for chat, and questions, perfect for questions. So with that, I think we'll jump right in. And Laurent, I will pass it off to you.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, and I should say, stick around till the end because we are going to have some freebies, some giveaways. So you're going to definitely want to make sure that you stick around to the end so you can get some of that free stuff that everybody loves to have.
Yes. Okay, so today we're going to look at how to create a CI pipeline, a unique CI pipeline that allows you to create multiple services, either from the same repo or from multiple repos. And I think that's one of the unique features that some of our competitors don't have. So before I jump in, you can see that Codefresh shows you a bunch of dashboards that give you kind of a high-level view of your deployment, and we'll focus that on the next two webinar, as well as your pipeline. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a project. So you can see the project. Let me move our face out of the way. You can see a project as basically, I like to call it a shoebox. It's basically kind of a container where you put different pipeline, and so you can organize them by by team, by project, any way you want. And the other thing you can use project for is to give permission, so you can decide who is going to be able to run your pipeline, to debug them, and so on. So let's create a project. So we're going to call it demo August, and you can add tag, and tag are used for two different purposes. The first one is for permission. So that way you can say, hey, for team A, they can run all the pipeline with the tag, CI or demo or stuff like that. So our permission model is what we call the ABAC, attribute-based access control. And the attribute is basically the tag. And the other way the tag are used are for filtering. So when you look at your list of projects, you can use that to filter by team or stuff like that. So let's add a tag, let's say demo for today. And then you can add kind of that cute little icon to make it a little easier to find it in the list. So let's create our pipeline. So now I have a pipeline, a project. Obviously, I don't have any pipeline yet because I just created it. One of the things you can do also with project is you can create variables. So those variables will be, of course, accessible to all your project. So that's make it easy to share, credential or to share, some specific value for a version or something, and then you can use them, of course, in your pipeline. So here's my my project. So now let's create our first pipeline. So here I'm going to start to create a pipeline from scratch, but you have the ability to define what we call template. It's basically a way to provide some startup for your team to use as a default pipeline. That way they don't start from scratch. You have an idea and you can put in that, some of your most common, build templates you have, or, deployment template and stuff. So yeah, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to name it build. And as the goal of today is to create a CI pipeline, I'm going to associate that pipeline to a Git repo. So that way, a trigger, a webhook is going to create it automatically with my build. So here's my integration. We'll talk about that in a second. Then I'm going to pick my the repository where my application code is, and then the same than for project. We can add some tag for permission. So here we're going to add a CI tag because that's what I'm creating. Okay, so let's create that. So do we have any question? Yes, so there's a question about the YAML file being in the root of the folder for your repo. Are we going to allow to put them into subfolder? Yes, we have an item in our backlog to get fixed. I cannot give you a date on when it's going to be done, but if you follow up with support, they'll be able to give you more information.
Is this a Bitbucket specific issue, Laurent?
I think so, because I have no problem on GitHub, so it may be Bitbucket specific.
Okay. Now, Laurent here is showing how to create the pipeline using the course web interface. And some people pointed out, hey, can I do this in an automated fashion? Of course you can. We have a Terraform provider, so you can create pipelines with Terraform in a declarative way. You can also use our CLI. So there's a number of different options if you want to create a pipeline another way. Now, one of the cool things about creating this pipeline, and we're going to get into that, is that Codefresh has the ability to do a shared pipeline. So you can create a single pipeline that works for many repositories. So there may be use cases where you may not need to create a bunch of pipelines in an automated fashion, just because you might be able to work off of a single pipeline for many.
Yes, and in order to do that, we have this notion of trigger. So if we compare to GitHub Action, where your pipeline is in the .workflow repository, it means if you want to create the same pipeline for multiple repo, you have to duplicate your pipeline, which is not that difficult. I mean, it's basically a copy. The problem is not the creation, it's then the maintenance of that, because then if you need a fix, then you're going to have to go fix it in the multiple repo. So so as you can see, first, before we dive in, is the syntax of our pipeline is YAML. So you may like or not like YAML, but it's it's the way it is. And each step is basically based on a container image. So we're basically Kubernetes native. So each pipeline is going to run on a container. So that container can be either predefined, because you use one of what we call type step plugin, and so we provide the image for you. Or you can also, if you use what we call a freestyle step, provide your own image, and that image can be either a public image. So in this case, Ubuntu. It can be your own image that you have in your own repository, and it can also, and we'll see that later in the demonstration, an image you just build in the same pipeline and you want to reuse. So that's how the pipeline showed up. As you can see here, I have this little bit of weird syntax where I have the double curly bracket and then name, and that's how we use variable in our pipeline. So one of the things I'm going to do is to change, here, because I created a trigger on that repo, it's hard-coded. So I'm going to change it to use some variable instead. Because, as I say, we can use the same pipeline to build from multiple repo. So I'm basically using variables that are going to be provided by the trigger, and I'll look into that in a second. And Codefresh provide a lot of variables that you can use out of the box. And depending on what Git provider you're using, you may have some slightly different version for Git or for Bitbucket and stuff like that. So that's the first thing we can do. So let's go look at our trigger. So trigger is basically a webhook that, in this case, GitHub, because I'm connected to GitHub, is going to send me when some specific action are happening. So it can be just a single push, or it can be a pull request created, or merge, or release created, and so on. So you have a lot of possibility here to create your different triggers. So here I'm going to change it because I'm going to just want to build a single service in this case. And if I go look at my application, you'll see that I have 3 different microservices: Bislog, controller, and Flask UI. And each one of those has a Docker file that we're going to use to build the container, the image. So here I'm want to build every time there is something changing in the controller. So that way I don't have to build all my microservice every time something changes in the repo. I just want to build that particular microservice when something changes in its folder. So I can trigger on different objects, and then I can filter on different branches, peer commit and stuff like that. So for today, the only thing I want to change is I want to trigger only when I'm on a particular subfolder. So anytime anything changes in my controller folder, it's going to trigger that particular trigger. And because I have different services, I want to be able to set up some variable to basically indicate to the build, what I am building. So I'm creating a variable called service. And in this case, I'm giving it a value of controller, and I'm going to use that in different step in my pipeline. And then we have additional option to change where it's run, how it's run, and so on. So, but for today, we'll keep the default. Okay, so now I have a push that's going to, when a push is going to happen, it's going to run my pipeline and run those commits. So the other thing you can see here is I do not have any information regarding my credential to access Git. Instead, I have this reference to what we call an integration. An integration is a way for us to store access, so typically a URL, login, password, an API key to different third-party tools. So what I was using, I think, is this one, and I have a name, and I'm passing some different information depending on what is the tool and what method I'm using for for that tool. And again, as you notice, there is also some tag you can use because you can give different permissions. So that's the integration. So that way you don't have to share your login and password with everybody in your team. You can just put them in those integrations that are accessible only by admin. Sorry.
I kind of think of them like objects that you get to reference, right? So
yeah.
And this is actually maybe a good point to because someone was asking, hey, can you highlight some of the differences between GitLab and GitHub Actions and Jenkins and those kinds of things. So just to give you the overview for Codefresh and what we do, we have CI/CD pipelines, which is what we're going to be showing today. We also have GitOps deployment tools for deploying using GitOps, and that's what we're going to be showing in 2 weeks. And then we have environment management and promotion tools that we're going to be showing in 4 weeks. which shows how to do take and compare different environments, deployment environments. So those are very CD focused. Now here, we're going to be talking about CI, and we are going to do some CD components in here. The way that those objects work that Laurent referenced, basically you define once a GitHub integration, a Kubernetes cluster. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of objects you can create. You can also create, when we talk about the variables, you can have variables that are specific to a pipeline, or they can be shared configuration that exist across multiple places. So for example, if you wanted to create your own, I don't know, OIDC configuration identity provider and have that be a shared configuration that was available to multiple pipelines, you could do that. And what that does is it means that when you write the pipelines, you can write them generically with variables in such a way so that you don't have to, repeat yourself over and over again. Another thing to point out as we look at these steps, Laurent mentioned that, hey, you can run a step as a container. You can just take an image and throw it in and run it as a step. You can build an image in a step and then run it in the next step. The way that this works is a little bit different than what you would have seen in other CI providers, because each step here is actually going to execute in its own container that is separate and unique. Now, to keep it easy to work with, we create a shared volume across the entire pipeline. So each step can read and write to that same shared volume under the same paths. And so what it allows you to do is create an artifact, write it to the volume in one step, and then use it in the next step, even though it's in a different container. So it's very easy to, for example, if I wanted to run a binary in 5 different versions of Java, or build 5 different versions of Java, I can do that in the same pipeline, even though I'm checking out the same code, same workspace. I don't have to replicate that in each build process.
Okay. And I'm going to show some of that in the next few minutes. Some people were complaining that my screen size was a little too small, so I tried to increase the font size. So let me know if it's still too small. So what Dan was mentioning is, you can have build multiple things from the same pipeline. So here, that's what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to create another trigger. So again, it could be into a different repo or in the same repo. It doesn't matter. The principle is the same. So here I'm going to use the same repo, but you could, pick something else. So I'm going to use still a push, and the only thing I'm going to change here is instead of being in the controller, I'm going to be in the bus log. And again, I'm going to use that variable to differentiate between my two build log and variable. Next. And done. And so now I'm going to have a second trigger. And again, I have some example with multiple repo and stuff like that. So okay, now we've the first thing we do is we clone or a repo. So I'm basically bringing the code locally to my pipeline, and then I'm going to build it. So I need to do a couple of changes because my org in Docker is slightly different name. I'm going to change the working directory because the folder where I want to run my Docker command is where my Docker file is, and my Docker file is in the repo I just cloned. And as you can see here, I'm using the name of the step as my variable. We have a couple of those, variable that can reference a step, and basically it's pick the folder where the code was downloaded, and I'm going to go under the service one because that's where my Docker file is under the bus log or the controller folder. So that way I can build it. And by using also that variable, that context variable, it doesn't matter what repo I have changed. So what happened? I changed. Sorry. It's like one of my change didn't pick up. Let me change that. So it doesn't matter what folder, what repo I'm cloning, it's going to be referenced, using that variable. So again, it's a way to change what we build using the same thing.
Now, it's worth pointing out that here we're using a repository that has multiple services in it. So it's a mono repo style setup.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, right? The triggers can be associated with any repository or even different Git providers. And they're just going to operate with the context of the trigger that comes in. In this example, we're doing a mono repo just because it's simple to demo and it's a simple thing to set up, and it gives you an idea of how some of the different variable management works as we specify these paths and things.
So I'm changing the tag I'm going to add to my image to be the shy instead of the branch. I'm going to tell it, that same way for Git, we were using a reference to our integration to object where my credentials are stored. So here I'm going to do the same for Docker. And finally, I want to add a little bit of information to make my build a little more visual. Is I'm going to add what we called an annotation. An annotation is basically a pair key values that you attach to multiple objects in Codefresh. It could be to a pipeline, it could be to a build, which is my case here, to different objects. And you can use those for, for filtering or to display some information on the build page and so on. So let's run that pipeline. So the right way to do it would go to Git, push a change and stuff like that. But we're going to emulate that. So when I run my build, I have a way to basically say, hey, pick the trigger you want to use to build your pipeline. So, and I need to pick one of those because I need those variables to be evaluated, and they're coming from the trigger. So here I'm picking my trigger, I'm picking the branch. And here, as you can see, I have my variable has been picked, from Git. If I had some variable coming from other location, I'll be able to eventually override them and stuff like that. And so, and we also have a debug mode we'll talk in a few minutes. So let's run that pipeline. So as you can see at the top, you'll have some information on, of course, the name of your pipeline, what repo it's coming from, and the branch, who was the initiator, who runs the build. Because I'm picking a trigger and I had the push, I have my message from my Git push, who was the last committer, and so on. And so as you can see, I have different columns that represent my stages. We didn't talk about it, but there was a field name stage that allows you to basically kind of sort your different steps. And for each step, of course, you can click on it and see, the log. And you can download that log at HTML as text. You can also do a search using Command F on Mac that allows you to go search something. So if I search for, Trio, for example, it's going to give me that.
And now this is another time to mention one of the benefits of using Codefresh. This shared volume that I talked about earlier is, in this case, we're running this build for the first time, right? But as we run this in the future, that shared volume is actually stored and cached and will be restored into the pipeline when we want to run it, so that we actually get optimization in performance. And that works really effectively because those cache layers, those will come, from network storage. But when you're actually working with the volume in the pipeline, that pipeline is set local to the SSD on the node where the build is happening. So you can pass information very, very quickly, write and read between steps, different containers, even though they're different containers. And you don't have to go over the network. And traditionally, if you're using something like a Jenkins or something like that, the easiest way to share information between steps like that would be to use network storage, which of course would create a huge performance impact when you go out to actually write and read those images. There's a good question here from Saja, who says, if you have hundreds of microservices in a monorepo, this cloning step might take a long time, right? Well, yeah, but like I said, because that volume is cached, once that volume is there, you're actually just you're not checking out the whole repo, you're only checking out diffs and changes. So it's actually it's a bigger deal how often the repo would be changing rather than necessarily how large it is. So it depends. If you have a multi-gigabyte size repo, then that's going to be a different story.
Okay. As you can see, I have an error because it's a live demo, so I need to have an error. And I realize I misspelled my variable. It's CTRLR, not CTLR. So let's go figure that. So that was my trigger. That was this one, the controller one. And if I go into advanced option, CTRLR, update. And I'm going to run it again. And what Dan was talking about, the caching, we should be able to experience it, right now. If I go to my initialization, we're going to see that I'm reusing a volume that was previously used. Because we have this mechanism of volume management behind the scene that will automatically say, oh, you will run that pipeline. So I'm going to reuse the same volume because you don't use it anymore. And so it's going to be a lot faster. So that's what happened. So I'm reusing basically the same volume that my previous build. And the clone should be a lot faster. I don't know if you pay attention, but the previous one was 49 seconds, and this one is only 12 seconds. It's because the system realized, oh, I had already everything I needed, so I don't really need to do anything
cool.
there. So it's a lot faster.
And the way that this volume management works is very intelligent. I've seen people try to implement this kind of volume management themselves in other CI providers, and the logic is a little bit more complex than you'd expect because there are security implications. You're writing variables to a volume, so you need to have certain rules for when the volume can be reused and when it can't, and that'll keep it secure. And that's all baked in. You don't have to mess with it at all. There are some ways you can make some modifications to the way that volume works, but by default, it just kind of works out of the box for most people.
Okay. So my build was this time successful. So I created a new image and push it to to Docker, and then I run my test, which was a basic ls. Question: what are option step recommended to send notification? So we have an SMTP step that you can use to send email. We also have a Slack notification step, depending on what you want to do. So the runtime, we have two different modes. So here I'm running onto the SaaS, so you don't really need a runtime. So it basically run the build run on Codefresh, cluster. You also have the ability to create what we call the runner. And in this case, the runner would be on your own cluster. And in this case, yes, you have to create it, but it's something you do once. And you can select it. I'll show that for my next one. So let's go back to our pipeline and let's look at a couple of things. So one of the things I wanted to change, I forgot, is instead of building that Trio app, because I have multiple microservice, I'm going to basically create the service / demo. And the rest is the same. So let's remove that kind of useless test. And instead, I'm going to test the image I just created. So here I'm just going to do a simple curl. I know that particular microservices should answer on port 5000. And again, the same way that here I was using the clone step to get an idea of where my repo was, this time I'm going to use a build reference, for that step name here in my image. So basically I tell the system, hey, use the image I just built into the build step. And here we're also looking at what we call composition, that allows me to run a step and in parallel basically create a service with an image, and it can be again the image I just built or an image coming from somewhere else. And because that particular step is very specific to that service, I'm adding a condition to say just run if it's my service is controller, because for Busland, obviously that would not work. Okay.
Now, these compositions are pretty flexible, so you can actually run multiple services there. So if you wanted to, for example, run a database and run your image against that database, you could do that. And you could have preset database images with dummy data in them and all that kind of stuff, and actually run the whole thing in an integration test just directly in the pipeline.
I don't think I'm answering the question about Teams notification. I'm not sure we have one, but we can go look. I don't think if I search for Teams here in my list of steps. Looks like we have an MS Team notifier, so we have something. So you can go look at the example of what you can pass. So here you go. So it's part of our offering.
He might be asking specifically how to trigger a pipeline if webhooks are not available from Teams.
Oh, sorry.
But I don't know. It could go either way. And of course, you can trigger a pipeline using the CLI. You can set it up a cron job, so you can set it to just run on a schedule. So there are a lot of options. And then, of course, we provide the endpoint, so you can provide any kind of way to do it. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to crack that nut.
Okay. Because we're running out of time, instead of just doing a run with that test, I'm going to go to the next step as well. So once my test has passed, let's push that image to Quay as well and to Docker. And I want to add additional text. Okay, I need to match that. What did I call my? Let's remove that. So, sorry. So they match. So I'm creating my image and pushing. So as you can see here, you can do parallelism. So here, because I have a bunch, I'm doing push to multiple container registry, Docker and Quay. I can basically put all of the information I know are the same and then use that scale to basically then pass the information that are slightly different. So in this case, my registry, Docker Hub versus Quay. Obviously, the title of my step is going to be different. And my image is going to be different because on Quay, I don't have an org for that particular one. So I'm changing that. And the other thing you may notice here in the lower corner is I have some errors. So Codefresh provides some kind of a lint-like analyzer that tells me what error, and it says stage must be one of those and current value is push. It's because I say, well, I want to be in push, but I haven't defined the push stage. And as you fix the problem, the problem disappears. Okay. So let's
now
run
this matrix setup for running a pipeline, very powerful. I use it often if I want to build multiple versions for different versions of Java or Go, for example. I can use this matrix step if I want to push to multiple different Slack channels. Anytime I have one thing that I want to do many times with many formulations, this is a great way to do it.
Yeah. And as you can see here, it doesn't matter what I'm building. I have no variable, really specific to controller or bus log or even to my repo. So it's make it really easy. So let's run that. So let's use the same one. So it's going to be slightly faster. And let's run it. So is there any question while this thing is running? What is being done with the style defined in the push stage? What did I don't think I defined. I didn't define anything. I think I was. Oh, those. It's basically a way for me to add additional tags to the tag from my image. So in addition to the short revision, I want to add the branch and the branch dash the SHA. That's basically what we are doing.
Yeah, so each image that's being pushed is getting 3 tags for each repository that it's in. So it'll be pushed with its short revision, so you can reference it that way, its branch name, and then the branch name and the short revision, so that you have several different unique identifiers, as well as a floating tag if you wanted to reference just, hey, give me the latest from that branch, for example.
So now my step is running. And as you can see, my curl basically succeeded. And here I can go and look at the service that I created. So it created a service, and and because I created that service just for the step, as soon as my step finished, basically the service is removed. If you need to keep it for multiple steps, you can do the same, create that composition at the pipeline level, and that way your service would be available for the duration of the pipeline. Obviously, it doesn't work if you build your service midway, but if you need a database, for example, to test the image you just created, you can create your image at the start of the pipeline and have it for the duration of the pipeline. So here, as you can see, I have a parallel step. So I have a slight indentation, and my pipeline has been successful. Okay, so somebody was asking about Jira. So let's do that, because it's all about CI/CD. So the question now becomes, how do I tie what I'm building to the CD world? And we have a step called basically image enricher that allows you to add information to your image, because if you're old as I am, in the past you were building what we called an artifact. So it was maybe a jar file or a zip file and stuff like that, and that's what you were passing to for deployment and stuff like that. Today, basically, the equivalent of that is basically your container image, and so that's what you can use. You can use that object to basically pass some information from CI to CD. So that's what we're going to do. So let me do a copy paste, so you don't have to wait for me to type very slowly.
That's very useful later on. So as we're tagging these images, now in 2 weeks, we're going to show you how to deploy using GitOps and environment promotion. 2 weeks after that, those actually will extract from your images what Jira tickets were being worked on. So when you're looking at what's currently deployed, you can actually see which Jira tickets were just deployed, and actually even search where a Jira ticket is in the environment promotion process. So that'll be cool later on for us to use. Now, it's worth mentioning that you don't have to use Codefresh CI to get that information. We actually provide this image enrichment step for GitHub Actions, Jenkins, other providers, if you'd like to use it that way.
So regarding the Jira story, so that's what we are doing here. So I'm basically I'm assuming that people are committing their code, and that's what we're doing here. Basically, the code is going to be, between square brackets, the name of my Jira, like so proj-123, and then my commit message. So I'm using my message. I'm telling the system what is my Jira prefix, because of course it may be different from project to project. What is my PR branch that I'm calculating here to get the pull request information, and I'm passing some information. And as you've seen, all those variables are not defined here. So in order to gain time and for you not to be able to see my GitHub token, so my security team is not mad at me, I've created what Dan was talking about before. It's a shared configuration. It's basically variables that are stored at the account level, so you can share them with everybody in your organization. And so I created this, demo that have 3 different variables. So my Jira prefix, my GitHub token, and for later on into the demos, a flag token. And so I can attach that to my variable. And now I can rerun my pipeline. Did I forget anything? So as I'm starting to do a couple more things, let's say that, I'm going to also change the size of my pod. So I'm going to take something slightly smaller. And somebody was asking earlier about runtime environment. So here I'm running on SaaS, but you can also run on your own runner behind your firewall if you want. So let's run that, and I'm going to take advantage to do a debug session. And debugging is something that makes us very different from our competitor. In fact, I did a demo to one of our competitors, and he was really impressed by that because they don't have that. So let's go look at our test. So you can, for the default plugin, you can put a breakpoint before or after, but when you provide your own image, you can be dropped inside the image itself. So you can set your breakpoint, and then you can continue. And here the pipeline is going to start and basically stop the execution before or after, basically when I have a breakpoint. And what it allows you to do is to look at variables that are defined, look at the state of the volume of the disk that you have, because of course you can, because you have image, you can debug those on your own machine, assuming you have of course the same platform. Because if you're running on Windows, maybe you don't have a Windows image of that, or in my case I'm on a Mac, so I have an ARM processor, but all those images are Intel. So as you can see, so I stop, my pipeline is stopped, and I can go look at my volume, and I have a full shell. And as you can see, I have my Trio app, so I can go on the Trio app, and so I can go and look to be sure I get everything I wanted. And of course, I have my environment variable. So, and as you can see, the variables that are also encrypted are basically obfuscated into the log as well. So okay, so I'm done to look at. Now I can continue my pipeline. So that's out of the box, very different with other provider is debugger. And other people don't have debugger. We are native to container, which not every CI/CD platform, like Jenkins is, or Bamboo or stuff like that. We're able to have what I would call mono pipeline for multiple repos. I don't think that's something GitHub allows you to do. We can work on SaaS or your own cluster. I don't think everybody also know that. Do you have anything else to add that I missed, Dan, on that differentiator with competition?
Yeah, so the ability to do shared pipelines is a pretty big deal. We're talking about creating a single pipeline for many services here. Traditionally with GitHub Actions or other CI providers, you would create a single CI pipeline for each provider. Maybe you're using a template and reusing it. Here, we can create a single pipeline and just add all of our services to it. So it's a lot easier to manage from a maintenance overhead. Debugging is very powerful. The ability to go in and out of containers. I use this very heavily when I'm creating a pipeline, because it allows me to figure out my variables, and sometimes that's confusing, and doing it within the context of the pipeline makes it a lot easier to find those components and see what might have been missing or whatever. Obviously, all this stuff is scalable, so you can run it on your own Kubernetes cluster. You can run it on our infrastructure. You can run it behind the firewall. You don't need to set up any special ingresses for it to work behind the firewall, which is cool. You can do full self-hosted if you want to. It also provides a single endpoint for managing all of those webhooks and things, even if you have many, different runtimes you're taking advantage of, which is pretty awesome. The ability to use containers as steps and then the shared volume makes it very easy to get a speed optimized build without having to do any extra work. So ease of use is there. And then of course we have tons and tons of plugins and steps available to take advantage of. So you don't have to necessarily write everything yourself, which is great. So all of those things make up pretty important differences. And I'll share a link to the page, the Codefresh page that gives overview of all the CI kind of big values.
Yeah, the other thing we can do is, as you notice, I've done all my modification in the UI. which is a really an easy way when you start your first few pipeline to make it, because it's easier. But once you're happy with your pipeline, or you want to do more production, you can put it into a repo and use that as your source. So it's also mean you can control who can modify your pipeline and stuff like that, if that's important to you. So here, to continue the debug, so here I am stopping inside the step, and to prove I am really into my curl image. If I do curl-h, you will see that curl is here. So if I run a command that is slightly different, because maybe I have the wrong port in my code, I can tell that, and here it's going to give me an error. So versus if I run the right port, it's going to give me what I'm expecting. So it allows you to debug in the right context. As I say, all your variables are going to be there. Your disk is going to be there. So versus doing that on your local machine, where you, as I say, you may not have the right architecture. You may have to define a gazillion variable, which is a pain in the butt to do, to a Docker image and stuff like that. So that's making it a lot easier. And you're right there, and you have a shell. You can call back, the command. You have compression, expansion, and stuff like that. So let's make it really easy. So here we are good, and I'm going to continue. So, and we're going to do the push again. Again, that should be pretty fast because my code hasn't really changed, so it should be able to do that pretty quickly. But so that's, I think, one of the differentiators. I really love the debugger, as Dan said. It's make it really easy to go find some problem.
And you can, if you had a pipeline that took 40 minutes and then it failed at the very end, you can actually start the debugger from the failed step, and it will actually load the state that took you 40 minutes to get to, and then you'll just be operating from that step. Now that's possible because of the way that we work with that volume that I mentioned earlier, that shared volume. That shared volume, when it's created in stages, and so you can basically go back to a specific state of where the volume was. It's essentially stored as a Docker image, and it's multiple layers every time you do a step, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So let's go. Okay. So here it's basically adding to my image all my information about, Git, Jira, and stuff like that. So let's go, and then we can go to that image dashboard. That's basically is going to show you all the images that were created. So that's the one we were creating today. And as you can see, I have my tag, I have my information regarding my commit message, and I can go look at what repo it's coming from, what is my branch, what's my last commit. The pull request is not quite there. I'm sure it may not be the last version yet. And I can also, of course, go to the build where where that particular image was built. And that would be true if you were using, Jenkins or GitHub Action or, any other CI. So let's see if
now what's very cool is
okay.
Oh yeah.
Now I have my pull request. Sorry, because I just enriched it. It did not have information about the pull request. So now it's finished. As you can see, I have my pull request that I attached to my image, and where's the committer and so on. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so the what we were looking at in that image view, now again, we're gonna deploy these images and services in 2 weeks. And when we do that, Codefresh actually keeps track of every place in an image and which versions are deployed. So when you look at that image view, you can see, okay, for this given image, show me all the places it's being deployed and used right now across the platform. And that's really powerful if you're trying to track down, for example, let's say there was a security CVE that came out for one of your images. You could say, okay, this is actually deployed in 45 places. These are the places that we need to identify to be updated for that specific version. One question that came from Joe, in the approach that we mentioned of Docker layers for each step and the ability to debug from any point, is that specific to Codefresh or from Argo? That's a Codefresh feature. Argo, we're really going to talk about Argo in the context of Argo CD and Argo rollouts. And again, we'll do that in 2 weeks, and we'll specify which components are available to the community and which components are enterprise specific. But everything that we've shown you today is Codefresh CI/CD. So this is all Codefresh specific stuff.
So that's what Dan was talking about when I switched screen. So when you look at an image, you can see, what application it is. The little green dot here show you what it is. And of course, now I have an app, and I can go click on one of those apps, and it takes me to the kind of the CD side of the tool where I can see, my application and where it has been deployed. So
yeah, that's where it's deployed. And again, we'll show that in depth in 2 weeks.
So to tie it and to finish, as we're starting to run out of time, so here I'm going to deploy that image. So there is different way to deploy, especially in your first environment, because once you're past the first environment, we have now those promotion flow that we'll see in September. But you still need to kind of seed the CD pipeline. So one method people are using is image updater, and as a side, image updater is now maintained by some people from Codefresh. We took over the project. We had not seen any refresh in a very long time. So, but for today, what we're going to do is I'm simply going to change the version in my YAML file. So I have a repo where I have my GitOps, this one, where I have my manifest. So for my Trio app application in my dev environment, I have a value file that I'm going to go change. So in this case, it's going to be that value here. So that's one way to do it. So I'm going to clone that repo, basically modify the file using YQ, and then I'm going to push that back. And because my application is on autosync, and again, it's all the GitOps side, I won't go into detail, the sync is going to happen automatically. And I have an error, which is bad indentation on 126. There we go.
Someone asked if there's these variables that we're using, if there's a way to somehow mask ones that are a security issue. Any variable that's encrypted by default will be masked from the logs.
So as you can see here,
if you tried to echo out that GitHub token in the logs or something, it would show up with stars. It would be edited out.
And I show that into when we were debugging, I did the env command. The value were masked with 3 star, but as you can see here, they've been encrypted, so you cannot see them. So let's do that push. And that should conclude our demo. I think we're almost out of time. So
now let's just to explain that the way that we're deploying here. You do have the ability in Codefresh to deploy directly to Kubernetes. And you could deploy to ECS, you could deploy Terraform. You can really apply manifest or apply or deploy to anything in a Codefresh pipeline. If you're deploying to VMs, EC2 instances, whatever. If you're using Pulumi, all good to go. If you're using Terraform, all good to go. You can do all that stuff. Now, what we're doing here is we've built an image. Let's actually globalize it, right? We have a set of microservices. We need to build and test all of those microservices, and we needed to get them promoted up into production. So what we're doing here is we're building it. We're checking out the code. We're building it. We're running tests. We're pushing those images up to our different repositories that we have. We're putting metadata on the imagery. And then to deploy it, we are taking the images that we just built, and we are updating manifests in Kubernetes in a Git repo that is being watched by our GitOps deployment tool that's based on Argo CD. Again, that's what we're going to be showing in 2 weeks. So now that we've updated it, the manifests, those are going to be automatically deployed using the next step in the process, which is GitOps. Now, very cool. The whole flow here of deploying this pipeline that we created. Again, it can be used for lots of microservices. So I might have 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 different repositories, microservices that all need to be built, all need to be deployed, and I could use them all from this single pipeline by just adding more triggers to the process. So you can really see how this would help you scale up. And a very common problem that people have with CI is they'll be using templates or something like that, and they'll update a component and it needs to be propagated, and it's difficult to do. With Codefresh, I can update it. It's updated for everybody automatically. Now, you can also create templates that are reusable that people can pull in and use and can be shared. And you can create a pipeline of pipelines. So here we have a pipeline that's just steps, and we're just showing this. This is kind of like, hey, here's how you just build this thing. Now, I could actually create multiple pipelines from this pipeline and manage them all in a single pipeline, which is, so we can expand out and go pretty crazy if we'd like to with all of this stuff. Laurent, I want to show some of the freebies here as we're getting to time. Any final points on the demo here?
No, so as soon as this commit is done, my application here is going to commit, and then what we'll see in future environment, my environment, I'm going to be able to have a release that's going to take that particular image and move it to, it's like we have one in progress right now from dev where I'm pushing to QA and staging and production, but we'll see that in detail in a future stuff. Before you conclude, I just want to answer the question about template. So the template, when you create one, is basically kind of a one-time copy. If you want to reuse something, you have the ability to create a pipeline and call it. We have a step to basically call another pipeline, a sub-pipeline, and that way that code can be reused multiple times. And if the code is changed, then people will automatically use the new version.
And actually, would you click on just the home dashboard here really quick, Laurent? Because all the things that are happening across your entire projects and platforms are all going to be tracked automatically. If you go down to the CI dashboard, this will show us our pipeline activity, how often they're running, their failure rates. And then if you go up, and we'll cover these in the next session, it's going to be showing us all the applications, how often they're deployed, their failure rates. And we track DORA metrics automatically across everything. So you can actually see deployment frequency, lead time for changes, all this kind of stuff. So very powerful. Now we'll get into more of that in the next 2 sessions. Laurent, can I share my screen?
Yeah, of course.
So next steps, to get a demo specific to you, where you can come in and say, hey, here's our situation. Here's what we want to do. Here's what we want to accomplish. You can go schedule that at codefresh.io/request a demo, which is a great idea, and awesome solution architects are available to help you iterate on this stuff. And we have helped, just so many companies organize and create awesome DevOps, awesome deployment, awesome CI. So we have a lot of experience. No matter what you're doing, I guarantee you we've seen it before. Maybe with almost every use case. Every once in a while, I'll see something that surprises me. Usually, it's more of a surprise in the terms of, wait, you want to do what now? But usually we can be very, very helpful, and so definitely do that. If you don't have a Codefresh account, go sign up for one at codefresh.io. And you can click sign up. You can create a free account. You can get access to this stuff and start using it. We do have a free tier, so you can build on your own. You have to go through some verification to unlock builds. And of course, you can start trying this on your own. And for the giveaway, we are giving away GitOps certification. So in 2 weeks, I mentioned we're going to be talking about deploying using GitOps. And so we have a free 100% off code for you. We almost never do 100% off codes. So take advantage of this while you can. If you have some friends that would like to learn to use GitOps, feel free to send this on to them. There is a limited number of them, so do it quickly. and it will expire at some point. This covers both our GitOps fundamentals and GitOps at scale. There are 2 levels there. It includes labs, and we'll teach you how to do GitOps, how to structure your repositories, how to use application sets, how to do progressive delivery, canary releases, blue-green deployments. Super, super powerful. And then part 2 is going to be August 20th, and part 3 will be September 3rd. So make sure to come to those. Now, you are already registered for them. You'll get a reminder for them. Throw them on your calendar if you haven't. We want to see you there, and you're going to be able to see, hey, we just built our images. We ran some tests. Okay, now I want to get deeper into the deployment process and start using GitOps to deploy and have that awesome clarity about what's going on in all of my systems and my platform. So there was this question that Chitan said, hey, before you close this, you got to answer this for me. Where did that question go? He said, the reason I'm asking that if a company has a reasonable DevOps engineer to code within the tool, but as a Scrum Master, product owner, principal consultant, we need to have provided daily, weekly status to stakeholders and sponsors regarding the status, what is deployed, any patches applied to errors, crash in production, etc. I hope you'll cover these. So we talked about that dashboard that shows you the roll-up information. We have the DORA metrics to show you, hey, we had 4 deployment failures this last week, and you can click into them and dig into them and show them what they are. And we'll show you how that works a little bit more in depth in the next session. But we definitely see from Codefresh, yeah, you've got your developers who are in here, your DevOps engineers who are in here, but we also do see companies that put their product managers, their executive team, other folks, any stakeholders into Codefresh so they can see what's going on. And of course, we will report this information out into Slack, into whatever Jira or other providers that you have. So that way it's always bi-directional. I might be in Jira and click in and jump into Codefresh, and be into Codefresh, click, jump into Jira, and back and forth and into GitHub or whatever Git provider I'm using. So anyway, with that, I know we're at time. Now we had intended, we had actually set time for Q&A at the end originally, but we are out of time. But it looks like we were able to answer questions pretty rapidly throughout. So great job, Laurent, giving us that demo. Thank you so much for walking us through how Codefresh works from a CI/CD perspective. And this is just one component in Codefresh. There we have several more we're going to be showing that I think are really exciting too. So definitely do that. And then we did also mention, and we mentioned it a few times, hey, if you're using a GitHub Actions, if you're using Jenkins, a lot of times people will come to us and they say, hey, I want to deploy using GitOps. You have all this cool tooling for annotating images and bringing up information in my deployments that comes from Codefresh CI. Do I have to use Codefresh CI? I've got 10,000 Jenkins pipelines. The answer is no. I can actually get that information from my Jenkins pipelines using Codefresh if I need to. So that way you can just jump straight in and start getting value. There's a lot of great reasons to use Codefresh for CI, but we don't want to create any barriers for you to get access to the great tooling and CD in all of that. This whole thing is being recorded, and of course we will send that recording out. You're going to have access to it. And be able to look at it again. And of course, we'll do the 2 additional sessions. As far as the chat logs, Chitan is asking, hey, can I get all the chat logs? I don't know if I can copy and post that. So feel free to reach out to support@codefresh.io, and Laurent can help you track that down if you're looking for it specifically. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We loved having you. Great job, Laurent. Shout out to Jenny for putting this whole thing together, and Francisco in the chat, making it all happen. That was awesome. To get the free eligible certification, you got to use that code IHeartCICD that's on the screen right now. You can use the QR code to go there, select the bundle, which will give you both tools, and then put in that code when you go to check out IHeartCICD with those underscores separating it. So if you need to take a screenshot of the screen, now's your last chance. And of course, until the recording comes out. But like I said, there are a limited number of these free codes. And if you don't get one this time, you could get one next time. So be sure to join next time as well. So with that, thanks, everybody. Take care. And we'll see you in 2 weeks on the 20th for the next session on Codefresh 101.
Get out of